And we're here with a guest that I'm really, really excited about. Kirsty, and I already am forgetting how I'm supposed to pronounce your last name. Almeida.
Almeida. Well done.
Almeida. I got it. I got it right. That doesn't happen often. Thank you for that coaching tip backstage. I appreciate it.
Which
And
coaching tip? Did I give you one?
what's that?
Did I give you a coaching tip?
On how to say it.
Oh, right. How to say my
Right.
name. Okay, yeah, sorry.
So someone that I love a guest like you, so many directions that we can go, and that all leads back to one thing. And that's really exciting to me. But I think where I want to start off is bringing everything together and ask you, Course in Miracles
Mhm.
and music
Mm.
and healing.
Mm.
How can we tie this all in together?
We could probably, it's up to you. Let's see where it goes.
What's that?
I said, it's up to you. Let's see where it goes.
Okay, let's see where it goes. First off, you took a little bit of a musical hiatus, right?
Mm-hmm.
You stepped away a bit,
Mm-hmm.
and you were signed to Decca Records. You were
Mm-hmm.
performing all over the place, so
Mm-hmm.
that was not a small step to take to back away.
No, it wasn't. But it was. Now, looking back, I can see a million reasons why it happened. Can you hear me okay? Can
Yeah.
you hear me? So, yeah, there was a million things that happened about that now when I look back, in that way where you can see the story as you go along, and
Right.
you're like, oh, that's what. Now, I guess, I really understand what manifestation is. And at the time, I didn't realize that I was manifesting that reality with Decca. But my self-concept didn't match the reality that I was manifesting with Decca, because my record label, it became really clear really soon that what I was facing wasn't where my soul was at. Like, I think one of the first photo shoots that I arrived at, there was a bed and a hairdresser and a camisole. And I was like, what's the camisole for? What's the bed for? And they were like, oh, we just thought we would do like some shots of you lying on the bed. And I was like,
Right.
I'm a singer who sings, like, one of my main songs was called Shine All Your Light. And I was like, this isn't where I'm at. Like, this isn't right for me. This just doesn't feel right. I think I felt like I wanted to be in a different earth, and it wasn't the one that I was in. And so it became a big journey. But I think now, recognizing what was going on then, I was projecting that reality. So that was one
Right.
version of reality, and it didn't suit where I wanted to be. So
How did it feel to? You got to put in a lot of work getting to where you were, and I imagine it was a life worth of work. Probably from a young age, you wanted to be a musician, and
mm-hmm.
then you arrive there, which should be the top of your career, right? And you realize this isn't it.
Yeah. It wasn't easy. It wasn't easy at all. And actually, at that time, there wasn't a cottage industry. So there wasn't an independent cottage industry. It was label or nothing, really. So it was kind of like you had to have labels. But something in me was just absolutely determined that I was going to create a cottage industry. There was just something in me that was like, I can make my album covers and I can make them beautiful and I can bring creativity in a new way and I can do it differently. And actually, I didn't. I mean, I did. There was loads of things that happened, but actually it took me on another path anyway, because I got pregnant, and then I went through the most difficult time of my life ever, with all sorts of things that have now come to light, to do with the birth that I had and how difficult it was. And there was a lot of negligence in the hospital. There was a big story that happened. And actually, just recently, the story just came out in the press just a week ago. So I went through the darkest night of my life.
How long ago was this?
That was when my child was born, which was 11 years ago, or nearly 12 years ago now. And so for the first 6 years of my child's life, I just seeked and seeked and seeked and seeked and tried to find the answers for why I was so broken. But I couldn't get on a stage. There was no way. I think I did get on a stage actually, and I was given a standing ovation for saying I can't do this. Like, it's done.
You know, listening to your music, and I've taken a bit of a deep dive the last few days. Um, I could see that you were onto something though, because you're blending together uh, world traditions. Your music doesn't sound like any other music,
Mm.
but you hear bits of all other musics in it. Um, you took, you know, we often say the Course Miracles is holographic,
Yeah,
that you get one thing and you get the entirety. You can get one, two notes from your music and hear the world being played there. Absolutely amazing. And I hope everyone gets a chance to come. I've been talking about you for a few days, and I hope everyone gets a chance to
thank you.
go listen.
Thank you. Yeah, it was like music for me was everything. Like, it really was everything, like from morning until night. And music was my first language, and the only language that seemed to make sense to me. So it was such a big part. But just like the Course in Miracles says too, everything that's on the altar that we put in place of God has to come off the altar,
Right,
and then it gets put back up, in a new way, but not where God exists. So everything, like in my journey, everything was taken. Everything, absolutely everything, was removed off the altar. And music was the big, well, my child and music was the biggest one. They were like the biggest ones to go, but this is my identity, you know. But we have to, if we want to awaken, or if we want to step into the I am fully, then we have to be willing to lose every part and aspect of our identity. And then it comes back in a new way. Like now, I've just started writing what I think is going to be, I don't know what it will be. It feels like the most important work I've ever made.
right.
So,
And amazing that you had to go through all of that in order to get to the point to write the most important work. Puts
yeah,
everything into a new perspective, what we're
yeah,
going through now, because we're so often convinced this is the very worst thing that could ever happen to me. I can't imagine a musician feeling like I can't perform anymore. Um,
yeah,
and now you're here and at a whole new place, like a rebirth.
yeah, yeah. It's a total rebirth, and there's still rebirthing going on. Like I can feel the emotion now. Like there could be another, some more tears, but it's only because I'm starting to speak about it. Like it's been a very deep and very insular journey, as it has to be.
Right.
But it
I
feels, the other day, I just had a moment the other day actually where just melodies were starting to flood in, like God's going, and here's another one, here's another one, here's another one, here's another one. And some of these melodies are on such a level, like it's like nothing I've ever sung before. It's very different from anything I've sung. And uh it's very much worship music, but not worship as I've heard before. It's not worshiping a God that's outside of us. It's really worshiping us
right.
in um, in our highest and truest form. So it's just really beautiful that it's coming through.
Kirsty, do you feel like you're channeling?
Oh, always, yeah, always. I don't believe, just like every other great writer, I'm not putting myself in the category of great, but I mean, like the great writers, there aren't any great writers who say they're not. Everything I have ever written, I've had to sit and pass the dragons to get to the gold.
Well,
then when the gold has arrived, like it's really been like moving away from ego, moving as the ego's going, why are you writing? You're a rubbish writer. You're too old. This is never going to happen. You're too ugly. It just comes up with all sorts of anything to stop it from happening.
Right.
And then if I get past the dragons and the demons, then, and they're not demons, the thoughts, if I get past those, then it arrives as quickly as it takes to sing it. So there's not a massive amount of craft that goes into it for any writer. I think for any writer, because essentially none of us would even know how to write a song if we tried really hard. So it just comes from the imagination, and the imagination has to be God. So
I love beginning with that blank slate.
mm,
Everything's clean. When I write every morning and I have my screen up and it's completely empty. That used to terrify me
yeah,
20 plus years ago. Man, my job is to put some kind of words that are beautiful and make sense on that screen, and that's just too much. I can't do that. And of course, as an ego, I can't.
yeah,
But when I get out of my way and I ask the Holy Spirit, what should I say?
that's
What
it.
should I do? And everything just comes.
That's it. Fantastic. Isn't it amazing?
It is
Like
amazing. Absolutely.
once we click, and also it would have been, you know, you would have been a different identity, the one that was terrified of it. We have to drop the identity that's filled in fear to become the version who's not in fear of doing the writing. We're like,
Right.
in every second, we're shifting and shifting and shifting. It's absolutely
You,
amazing.
I get that here on my channel too. Um, I just started talking to course students and teachers and other metaphysical practitioners, maybe back in September. And it's me, my camera, very low tech, and whoever says yes. And I look at I have no editing skills. Uh, I look at some of the channels that are absolutely beautiful in how they present things, and that voice of doubt, even after 30 plus years of working with the Course Miracles, meditation teacher, practicing and teaching yoga and breath work, um, that ego is still present.
Mm.
And a lot of times we think of the ego as this uh, grand sense of who we are.
Mm.
But the ego is always also telling us, you're not good enough. You
The ego
can't do
goes
it.
vicious to vicious.
Right.
It's vicious. It can be. I mean, it can be vicious. Like
Sure.
ultimately, well, it's vicious because its job is to keep us separate. That's its job, and fundamentally, that's what we created it for, so that we have this essence, this feeling, this sense that we're separate to everyone in our life, but we're not at all, at all.
Did
So
you, even at your level of success, um, was it still that battle with the ego that you would get ready to step on stage and you would hear, I see your smile. I already know your answer because I saw you smile. Um, but you're stepping on stage at the height of your success and you think, I don't deserve this.
I don't think I ever thought that, but there was never a deserved thing because I'd worked very hard. So there wasn't a feeling of, there was definitely unworthiness, but not unworthiness of success, just a deep sense of unworthiness.
Right.
But there was always, pretty much always, on the good gigs, but there was pretty much always this sense of the steps from the side of the stage to the microphone, a sense that my job was to lose myself. So from the second, so before, on the side of the stage, my job would be to start breathing into, I have to leave. To me, like Kirsty has to go now. And then I'd walk onto the stage and there would be a feeling if, very often I'd like stay very much in silence to try, there's a place, and I can't describe it, but there's a place in the mind where you can go really high, like high up, high up, high up, high up, high up. And so I would like breathe myself higher and higher until there was no audience and there was no one in the room and there was no musicians and I wasn't there. And then I would open my mouth. And from there, like my tone would change and I'd sing different, So it was really Kirsty, the character, had to leave so that I could allow music through.
Right.
And yeah, so there was, from that point, there was never really a feeling of worthiness or not worthiness, or ego was gone in that moment. Not
Um,
always. Sometimes Kirsty would walk on stage and that'd be a bloody nightmare. Do you know what I mean? Like the gig wouldn't work.
right. That happens here too on my little stage. Um, and I find often the questions that I ask are reflective of what I'm relating to. If
Yeah,
I'm relating to the ego, then the questions I ask are very ego related. And if I'm allowing myself to open up, and we talked before when I first asked you if you would come up, um, and you said, "What would we talk about?" And I said, "Well, just let Holy Spirit take over." And you had such a overwhelming yes, let's do it, that I knew that we
of
were on the right track.
course.
One thing I wanted to touch base with is you traveled a lot going home as a kid, right?
Hmm.
And I think I read a comment where you said music was the only consistent home that
Yeah.
you had.
So I would move, I think I went to like 21 schools, but something, it might be more, I really don't know. But each place that I went to, I knew that if I went to the music department, because I was really good at music and it was really natural for me, I would just immediately be welcomed. So music became the place that I would go to, if I went to a new town. And even when I was older, it was easy to go to a jam session and kind of join in and then be like, you'd have people to talk to because they'd be like, great singing. That was great. So it was just like this, it was the place that I went to until the Course in Miracles. And then it was like, oh, this has to go. Or something in me just stopped.
That's
So
what I was going to ask you. If you could tie, I'd love that comment that music felt like the only consistent home that you had. Um, and then we get to A Course in Miracles and we go, wait a minute, home isn't here,
yeah,
or at least not as we imagine it, that we're actually already at home right now, but
yeah,
we're asleep and we're dreaming that we are separate. So anything that we experience in this world, maybe we could say it's a metaphorical representation of home. And I think music might be as close as we can get to truly being home.
might be. Bird song might be. A flower might be.
Flower might be.
I think I can't really comment on that one because the more that I don't even know how to put this, but the deeper that I've got into the Course in Miracles, the deeper things have shown themselves to me and the most incredible miracles have happened and I've seen some phenomenal things. But there was one moment where I really declared, and I was so strongly ready for this at the time, but I really declared, that's it. I'm a teacher of God. Do you know what I mean? Because I like, study the Course Miracles and it just blew my mind and all the miracles that happened were like phenomenal. So I was like, no, this has got to be it. But like it says in the Course, it says it somewhere in the manual for teachers, when you decide that you that you're going to be a teacher of God, or is decided, there are different stages. And so there's the first stage, and things start kind of moving around and shifting about a bit.
Right.
Then there's another stage where you come to peace and it all feels really good, and these students are brought to you and you've got all these amazing students and it's all working out and you feel like, yeah, this is fantastic, this is beautiful, and you can see the shifts. And then it says, then you'll start to let go of some stuff because you'll be like, this doesn't fit with this. Let me let go of this junk in my house and I'll clear out some stuff. And then comes a phase where that settles. And then there's a phase, and it's on a page that I didn't read properly because there's a phase where it says, and then I'm going to take away some things that I think you're not ready to let go of, but you
Right.
need. And so I went through a 2-year phase of losing all sorts of things, and the darkest scenario ever for me. Not ever, but one of the most toughest environments that I've had to be in for 2 years, where I just had to keep bringing the course. It was the only thing, and I even let go of the course. I was so terrified, but slowly I started to use the lessons in a way that was really very phenomenal, and everything started to return into my life, but in all the right ways, in ways that I could never have seen, if that makes any sense.
It does
So
make
yeah,
sense. You've just described the past couple years of my life.
there you go.
And it's difficult because you think you're there. Um, Living at that place of trust, Manual for Teachers talks about that we are, and of course, we all want to trust the Holy Spirit. We all want to. That's the
Yeah,
whole big thing for me on the spiritual path was I made a mess of my life.
yeah,
I had a decade of um, um, addiction to alcohol. I was self-destructive. I felt like I earned my stripes, and I'm here, and I'm ready to surrender and leave that behind. Um, and you do settle in. Life gets nice and steady for a bit, um, but then you realize what I've realized is I'm still placing value on the things that don't truly have value,
yeah.
and they go. And the more I cling to them, the more I want to hold on to them, the more painful it is. But ultimately, we get to that place where we realize I didn't lose anything of value.
No, it's an illusion. And so we're holding on to an illusion. We're holding on to dust. But um, it's kind of like being on a roller coaster ride on psychedelics, because there's nothing happening. You are totally safe, but your mind is showing you an environment and a visual that isn't necessarily there, and you're terrified of what you're seeing, and it is going to be over, but you're on a roller coaster ride on psychedelics, in the kind of letting go of everything and letting
Right.
and awakening, like where people are like, oh, I awakened, and I'm not judging them. I was definitely one of these people, right? In fact, I'm not even going to say that. But there was a moment in my life where I was like, everything's so sparkly. It's just so beautiful. And I just think it's happened. I think I've awakened and everything is amazing. And a woman who I was working with at the time in the Course Miracles, she said, oh, right, that's good. She was like, oh, that's amazing. Yeah, well done. That's fantastic. She was like, how are you feeling about your ex? How are you feeling about your ex? And I was like, grrr!
Right.
He's a loser and he's a this and it. And she was like, oh, not quite awakened yet then, have you? So, there's like all of these different phases where until we ultimately get to the place where we really have let go of it and aren't judging anyone for anything, then it's just a continuation of the journey.
Ram Dass used to say, if you think you awakened, go spend Thanksgiving with your family.
That's it. That's
Uh,
it.
and that will quickly awaken you to your
Non-awakened.
awakening, non-awakening. Exactly.
To how non-awakened you really are.
Um, what I love about the Course in Miracles is in that ultimate sense of awakening, I don't have to worry about it. When I practice forgiveness, when I practice true forgiveness, in the moment that I'm doing it, I'm as awakened and as enlightened as I'm ever going to be. Now, the next moment, a judgment might come back, a resentment, a grievance, whatever, but I get to forgive again and again and again. And it's in that continuous forgiveness that like pearls on a string, I get to navigate through my life on these beautiful, awakening, forgiving moments. And if at the end everything comes together in one beautiful strand and I find that I am ultimately awakened, that's a bonus. But this moment of pure forgiveness, whatever that might come to me, all I need, absolutely all I need right now.
Beautiful. I think there is a confusion around forgiveness, can be confusion around forgiveness, in that and this is contentious, can be contentious, because this is where this is where communities go, no, what about these people, and what about this, and what about the other? But there are two aspects of forgiveness, right? So one is, I'm going to forgive them for what they did. And what the Course in Miracles is leading us to ultimately is the realization that we wanted the experience of separation. And so each of us is in our own illusionary reality. Not a reality at all, but each of us is in our own. Think of it, the easiest way to see this actually is to think of it as your own simulation, where you're the only player and everyone else in your simulation is a dream figure. And so there are potentialities of every single one of those dream figures. And so what we've done is we've selected the story we wanted to experience. I'll go through this, I'll go through that, I'll have this kind of experience. And that's what we have experienced in our separation story. So potentially when you were in your harder days. So those stories, everyone has a harder day story where it's like, my family did this and this happened to me as a child and this was very difficult and I went through all this trauma and everything was very tough. But essentially, those are memories that are here for us to have that separated experience. So we ultimately realize, oh, there wasn't anyone there doing it to me. It was an experience that I had to see what it was like to be separate, to go through trauma, to go through the pain. And so eventually we realized there's no one to forgive, because if we're going to forgive them, then we're still making it true that they did it to me, instead of, oh, I went through this experience to see what it was like to be, separate. Everyone has these experiences. And so if I drop it, obviously we have to feel the pain or the emotion that can be still residing there. But once that's done, it's like, oh, there's no one to forgive because no one did anything to me. And so
Right.
therefore, that's true forgiveness.
How was that realization for you? Because a lot of people, they run up against that and think, I would never choose that. I would never purposely want this to happen in my life. It's too awful. It's too big. It's too horrendous. Um, but when we think about it, when we accept that full responsibility, for me, that's when the healing starts. Because as long as I'm blaming, if I'm blaming God, circumstances, other people, events, I've made myself a victim. And I don't think a victim is ever at peace.
Yeah.
And for me, above all, I'd much rather be at peace.
Well, for me, the journey was pretty wild, because I had to go through maybe like 6 years of PTSD, trauma therapies, deep. I mean, I did like the A to Z of trauma therapy, with abuse from when I was 2 years old, abuse from when I was 4 until I was 7, with two different male figures in my young childhood life, and they were both adults, obviously. And there was like, a lot of projection onto people around me because of everything that I had been through. But if I didn't have all of that, if that hadn't been in place, if those stories hadn't been in my world, in my story, if they hadn't been my story, then I wouldn't have had anything to have used the Course in Miracles to keep unpicking. I wouldn't have needed the Course in Miracles. I wouldn't have needed anything. To me, I would have just been back with God. Like it would have been, in total oneness and all is well. But for whatever reason, and actually, you know what? I had this really very amazing miracle happen once. And this was maybe about a year ago, and it might make me cry, but I ended up homeless for just for whatever reasons was going on in my whole journey. But I ended up homeless, and I had £20 left. And I had no home and there was no stuff. I had my guitar, amazingly, and my child still with me. But I had put my child in his dad's house and I started satelliting in his dad's house, just like, I'll come when you're not there and I'll look after him. And the rest of the time, I'm not sure where I'll go. And I had £20 left. And I got on a train because I'd just seen my child and I was going somewhere. I was trying to figure out where to go next, actually, and where to live. And the train went to the wrong place. I mean, like literally it wasn't like it just went in the opposite direction from where I had booked. And I checked and there was nothing on my phone that said that there was another train going anywhere else. Like it just didn't make any sense. I was the only one on the train and the train just went somewhere totally random. So I get out the train, I'm like, can you tell me if there's another train going back? And they said, no, I'm afraid there's no more trains now. And so I look and I'm in the middle of nowhere. So I call an Uber with my £20. I'm like, I'm just going to have to get to the hills and I can sleep in the hill. Like, I just don't know. I can't be in the city. And I get into this taxi and the taxi driver says, he's like, having a giggle about different stuff. And I've just left my son at his dad's house. And he says, have you heard the story? We didn't even have a conversation. I didn't tell him anything about my situation. I was very silent. I just got in the taxi, said, can you take me here to this place? And he said, can I tell you a story? And I said, of course. And he said, have you heard the story of Moses? So I said, no. And he said, there's a story about Moses and there's another story that I'm going to tell you. So he just starts telling me the story and he says, some of the people in the Bible, he said, had to go through sex abuse. Now, this guy is like, I haven't even talked to him about my story. I haven't said a word. And he says, some people, went through difficult times. And he said, and I'm telling you now that the reason that those things happened to them in the way that they did was because they became speakers. They became people who spoke about their journey. And I was like, oh, okay. And he said, because they became people who became leaders in a way of teaching people what peace truly is and what forgiveness is. I was like, oh. And then he said, and the story of Moses, he said, no one knows. He said, but Moses was abused. And I was like, was he? And he said, yeah. And he said, but Moses became this great leader and this great speaker. And then he said, Moses' mum had to let go of him. Now, I've just left my son at his dad's house, and I haven't told this guy anything about that. And he says, can you imagine what it must have been like for her to let go of her son?
Wow.
And I said, kind of. And he said, well, an angel knocks on her door and says, you need to let go of your son. It's been commanded, and you need to wrap him up and put him in the river and let him go. And he said, can you imagine being a mum and having to go through that? At this point, I'm like gripping the seats. So I just said, well, I'm not being funny. Like, I was quite angry with his statement because I've just gone through it myself. But I said, I'm not being funny. But if an angel had knocked at my door and said, you need to let go of your son, I think I would find that quite easy because it's an angel. And then he said, Oh my gosh, sorry about the tears, but it was so phenomenal. He stopped the taxi and he said, "Yes, but you see, the thing is, very often angels come in human form." And then he said, "You've arrived." And I opened the door and I was where I had asked to go. But that whole journey for me was like miraculous. I got on a train that didn't exist. I went to a place it wasn't supposed to go to. A taxi driver talked about my entire story and everything that I was going through and ended it with, "But sometimes humans, often angels come in human form." And so everything in my journey at that point, and I still didn't believe it, but everything was like, oh, I'm going through this whole journey because there's something God knows that I don't know. There's something. And that was actually the first night that I had to go and sleep in a tent on my own in the middle of the hills, terrified of what was going on. But that led to more miracles and more miracles and more seeings and more, I can't describe it, more and more. So it's kind of like, yes, life can be horrendous and very difficult, but ultimately we're going home and that's just the end of it. And so you can go home direct, like screaming, you can be dragged home,
Right.
or you can surrender now and start to get on your prayer mat and ask to be shown the way home.
Beautiful.
So yeah.
Uh, Beautiful story, and beautiful how you tied that all up from where we started um, with the manual for teachers and um, that first stage of trust
Mm.
to the ending of the story. Just wow. I had chills as you were telling it.
I had chills whilst it was happening.
I bet.
I was like, what is going on? How does this work? Ultimately, I really think that what Jesus or the Christ was here to show, and all the prophets, but ultimately what I believe was, they were here to show us that this is a simulation, that this is a dream theater, and that it's not real. I've seen stuff happen that just shouldn't happen. I've seen miracles happen in front of me. I've seen the seas part. I've seen, trains be put on when there shouldn't be one. I've seen planes leave when they shouldn't be leaving. I've seen so many different things happen through prayer that has really made me go, it can only be a simulation. It can, and now, of course, wonderfully, finally, science is beginning to back that up.
Right.
So like, I think, when we start to realize these things and see these things, life becomes way less scary because we no longer think that it's outside of us, but that really we are incredibly powerful, each of us. And that's what a miracle is. It's a shift in our perception.
Right. And there's that beautiful line in the course that if you only knew who walked beside you, um,
Yes.
the moment you have chosen, never
Yes.
be frightened again. Um,
Yeah.
you know, I years ago reading different books of the Kabbalah, and there's a wonderful story that um, when Moses went to part the sea, the Red Sea, uh, they had to enter the water before it parted to display the faith that
That's
was
it.
going to happen. Um,
That's it.
and that this was probably 30 years ago. I've read that story, and it stayed with me since. That sometimes you need to be in it, and displaying that faith, that trust, that I am guided, that He who walks beside me is here and is
There's,
holding my hand.
there's something else on that though, right? So when I was in Mexico, and I traveled from the north of Mexico to the south of Mexico with my son. He was about 8 at the time. And I'd done A Course in Miracles, and I'd started teaching it, and I was really trying to live it whilst I was traveling in Mexico. And I didn't have any data on my phone, and for whatever reason, I was traveling with my child, and we just went from place to place, completely guided. Like, it was really beautiful how it happened. And ultimately, one of the most incredible experiences of my life ever. But when I was there, we ended up going to a naked beach. And I was like, what? Like, how's Jesus or Christ or the Holy Spirit, whatever? How we ended up in a naked beach, and there's about 18 of us, 18 students, and my son's there and me, but we get taken to this naked beach. What a fantastic place to learn that you are not the body. What an amazing place. So on the first day, we're there for like a couple of weeks, me and all these students. On the first day, we're there in a naked beach. Everyone's a little bit like embarrassed. Oh my God, maybe I'll just go for 20 minutes. I don't know. This is, really uncomfortable. I'm not sure. Other people like, oh no, I'm really good with my body. It's still coming from the same ego, right? Whether you're super confident with it or you're the opposite direction, still ego. So we're going through this journey. By the second week of being in this fantastic Zibolita place, we had dinner on the beach, like maybe 12, 18, I don't know how many, there was a lot of us, all completely naked, twinkly stars, evening in a restaurant at a table, totally naked with all the candles, drinking red wine, having a 3-course meal, and no one bat an eyelid. No one noticed that. We were so comfortable with we were just discussing the course, but everyone's discussing the course completely naked. Just like absolutely phenomenal where this path of Course in Miracles has taken me. It's been amazing. But one of the things that happened when I was there was I had a moment where they said, no one can swim today because the waves are too big. And we've been praying a lot together. Like, we were deeply praying all day, all afternoon, all evening. It was just like prayer and reading the course and studying and living it. And I went down to the waves, and I don't even know how this happened or why I got into this position. But I just noticed that the waves, they were huge, towering, like, I don't know, I've never seen waves like this, huge. And for whatever reason, something clicked in my mind that they were just trying to induce fear. And I was like, but I'm not afraid. So they have to back down because there's no fear here. And so I spoke to the waves and was saying, like, you like, this is laughable. Like, what you're doing here it's laughable. You can't, like, look at you, like, ooh, you're so scary. You're so scary. Like, that was the energy that was within me. Like, ooh, look at you. Oh, you're so scary. What are you doing? Stop. Like, you have to stop. It's like a command. Like, you cannot be in this state of inducing fear or reflecting fear when there is no fear here. And so I was having this conversation with the waves, which sounds ridiculous right now, but at the time it made total sense, and it was so pure from where it came from. And then literally these huge waves moved in the center, like that, like moved in the center, one massive wave just like split, and it just moved, and right through the center was just the sun on the most calm central point, and it all went to pure peace. And I was like, nothing in me felt like, wow, look who you are. Like, the only thing that happened was this: good, like, well done. You've listened. You've been told. And so you're not allowed to do that when it's not, when it's not acceptable. It was just that
Right.
feeling. And what I realized very quickly was the Christ is within us all. There's only one Son of God. And so all the parables are there to teach us that we can do the same. And like, I didn't realize that before that happened, but had I not been in the water, you have to get in the water to show that you have no fear. And it's that you have no fear makes your simulation, or whatever it is that you're experiencing here in this dream simulation, it makes it stop. That's what immediate manifestation is. But the parables are just there to show you, if you believe that someone is sick in your life, they're not. There's another version of them that is not sick. And so if you choose that they're not, but you have to realize you're not healing them, you're just selecting the version of them that is not sick. The version of them that is sick still exists. And the version of them that is not sick exists, and you're selecting in your reality. But what the Course in Miracles is leading us to is that's our job. Like, our job is to no longer see and collude with the belief that the other is sick, or collude with the belief that that there's lack. Once we start to clean up our own mind, and it's only in our own environment, in our own reality, of which there's no one else in it. Like, it's there's only one of us here amongst us all.
Right.
So
That
yeah.
reminded me of how Kenneth Wapnick would talk about the script. The script is written, but as we practice the Course, as we practice forgiveness, we are, it's like a different version. He would use the example of a DVD, that you could have the director's cut. You could have the alternative ending. And as we practice forgiveness, we are, the script is all there, but we're smoothing out those rough patches in a way that if we
Yeah.
hadn't been practicing forgiveness, we wouldn't be able to navigate with that same amount of grace
Yeah.
that we can now.
But the script is written for every particular identity that we can embody. Meaning, there's the version of you that is, the apparent alcoholic, and that script just keeps going. So if you become aware of that and you choose that, that just keeps going. Yeah. So you can't stop it because you have no free will within it. You have to assume at a perception level that you're now not that version. But it's the same with if you assume that you now are abundant and that money is easy for you, that is another script that you can then embody. And that script also exists. And so God has created all the scripts for us in this. All scripts are written, meaning all versions of your avatar or your person or your human, whatever you want to call this, they all exist. And you can become aware of any of them at any point, but you won't have any free will with it. Like, if you become aware of your millionaire self, you will not have any free will, which some people will be like, oh, that sounds fantastic. But you will not have any free will within that. You will just be a millionaire and continue to be the millionaire on that path. But all the scripts are written. All potentialities for you exist in this now moment. So some people, I think, we get, it can be confusing because the script also says it's already happened. Everything
Right.
is, it's already done. But within that, there are moments where we're going from lack to realizing lack was a lie, to sickness, to realizing that's a lie, and the reason it's a lie is it's not who, it's what the ego is showing us so that we think that we're not the powerful God that we are. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And we have a question along those lines. So if you don't mind, you want to
Yeah,
answer a few questions?
yeah, go for it.
Um, about A Course in Miracles. If there is an illusion, and if we are merely remembering a script already written, is synchronicity actually the audible signal of the soul recognizing its own path from the source?
So good. I need to read it. Where is it? Can you read it,
Um,
or can you ask me?
I'll read it again, and I will pin it. If you look at the chat, you should see it should be in dark.
Oh yeah, perfect. Question about ACIM. If time is an illusion and we are merely remembering a script already written, we're not merely remembering a script already written, but is synchronicity actually the audible signal of the soul recognizing its own path from source? Okay. First of all, I don't believe in synchronicity at all, because synchronicity would assume that something has synced up kind of by accident in some sort of or like, that's very like, I don't know how to describe it. Like, we use the word like synchronization very often with different meanings. And so one of those meanings can be something has happened and it's a kind of accident, like, that's kind of happened. Synchronicity is like, ooh, how there's synchronicity happening over there. But really, everything is happening very simply. It's like, you are the cause in your own life, and your life is the effect of everything that you're believing, and that's it. It's only a mirror. So the idea of merely remembering a script already written, the only word that I have an issue with there is merely, because it's massive what's going on. It's huge. Because we're going from, think of it this way, we're going from duality, which is two, which is victim consciousness, which is I am the victim of the world that I see, which has the victim triangle as the backbone of it, to unity, realizing that we are God of our own reality, and that we can be do anything that we want in any direction at any time, and that absolutely everything that is happening in our personal reality is entirely being selected by our own mind and projected outwards. So the words that I have an issue with are merely and synchronicity, because the question is kind of like coming from a place of, is it just that we're just remembering this? But in real time, and I don't mean that there is a real time, I mean in the now moment of it, it's huge, it's vast, it's massive. So maybe, Squirrel Sniper, you could, now that you've heard just what I've said there, give me the next version of the question from there.
Okay. Be on the lookout for it. And we had another question. This was about your meal that you had. While everyone was naked enjoying the meal, was there any moments of self-consciousness or shyness, or was everyone just enjoying the meal and the conversation?
Because everyone was just enjoying the meal and the conversation, and there was no shyness anymore. It was completely and utterly done. But essentially, in if we think of it metaphysically, in my reality, if we want, there is no reality, but in my dream, whatever you want to call it, reality is the easiest way I can use it, right? In my reality, the 2 weeks was not about everyone else losing their inhibitions. It was entirely about me losing mine. And of course, once I was fully, completely, and totally relaxed with the entire thing and not seeing bodies anymore, it would mean that no one else would either. So no one else was at the table, because there was no one here projecting out any, there was nothing to feed back, anything but peace, anything but joy. And it was, what, the thing that I found at the end of that journey, and that was a big journey for me, because in my story there was all sorts of body dysmorphia and hating my body and all sorts of stuff. So it was a real healing for me. Like, it was a real kind of shifting from one identity to another identity. But the thing that I realized at the end of it is, once you get good with that, I started looking at people with clothes on and thinking, why do we do that? To me, like, it just didn't make any sense, because it was so freeing. And it was, but I don't mean freeing in like the way that we might think. I mean, it was so freeing when there was no ego around it, because there was no sexuality within it. There was nothing projected within it. There was just, why don't we live like this? Like, it was very, very beautiful.
Right.
There you go.
Do have another question, but before I get to that, as someone who has suffered uh, those issues relating to your body, when you came across the lessons, I am not a body, I am free, for I am still as God created me, that must have been fairly liberating to hear and to get
No,
that realization.
no, it didn't click for me at all, because I think when we go through the course and we go through the lessons and we do them, really the first kind of unpeeling of it all can be like, I couldn't even hear the lessons for the first 60 lessons. I was just like, what? I think I was in nightclubs trying to do them, just kind of like, oh shit, I haven't done the lesson. Quick, let's do the lesson. Do you know what I mean? It was that kind of thing. But then I went through the first year of it, and something clicked on a momentum that was just huge. But I didn't get the lessons as I was going through them. It was really kind of stepping further and further out of the ego and more into surrender, and a lot more out of the victim triangle. That for me was huge. Just the learning how not to how to not defend was massive for me. That was a big one. So when I got to the whole section on the body, I was just like, oh, I'm not body. That's pretty weird. But it wasn't. I didn't find it really helpful until I started to surrender. And when I started, I went on a real big path of surrender. And when I went on that, that's how I ended up at the naked beach. And then all of those lessons started coming into form for me, where it was
Right.
like, hold on, but we're not a body. So if I'm not a body, then what is this? So it was just, yeah.
At this point in my own journey, what I most love about the course is how the lessons come rushing to me in any given moment. The right lesson at the right time, uh, and it brings a smile onto my face. And oh, I'm taking this so seriously. And this lesson tells me, relax, we got
Yeah.
this. Um, and
It,
it comes with persistence. And I, um, such admiration for someone who can uh, do those lessons in a nightclub when they're getting ready to probably step on stage. Um, the fact that you were, it makes me think at some point you must have been suffering so much knowing that you needed to do this, even if you were just capturing a moment backstage before you went on stage. You knew you had to do this.
yeah. And well, I definitely knew I had to do it. There was nowhere else to go. Like if you I had a biog at one point, which was hilarious. I got rid of it, but I had a biography that basically just said, it was a really long list of everything that I had tried to find the answers, and I had tried everything. I tried everything from internal family systems to ayahuasca to, I don't know, colonic irrigation for 7 days, self administered 3 times a day. Do you know what I mean? Like all these different things. I had tried fasting for 10 days, where for 3 days I did juices, for 3 days I did water, and for 4 days I did no water, no food. So I had tried, everything. I tried bufo, which is the strongest psychedelic in the whole world, but it's now used as and also I'd only done these things once. I'd just like gone, tried it, it's not there. Tried it, it's not there. So I was like trying all these different things, and I couldn't find it. And it wasn't until someone said, you need to do the Course Miracles. And I was like, you know what? I'm telling you now, I am not going to Jesus. And that was the first thing that I said, because I'd had, a real past of religion. And so I was like, no, it's just not happening. No one here is going to Jesus Christ. There's no way. And she was like, listen, honestly, it really is that's the final thing. She was like, there is nothing else. And after a while, I said, okay, fine, I'll do it. But I had loads of issues with the word Jesus, issues with the word God, issues with the word Christ, issues with the word brother. And actually, it was amazing when we were traveling with the 18 students. It was pretty much, I think it was all women, and we all just called each other sister, brother. And then eventually we just called each other brother,
Mm.
because it was on we you eventually realize it's only the ego that has an issue with the word brother. It's only the ego that has an issue with the word God. It's only ego that has, you could call it whatever, it doesn't matter, it still works. So
Similar with me, I went to Catholic school. So, and I took a deep dive early in my life in shamanism, in Eastern philosophy, um, a deep, deep love for yoga after reading Autobiography of a Yogi when I was very young. Um, so finding myself Of course, there was hints of where I was going in Autobiography of a Yogi, because Paramahansa Yogananda has a deep love for Jesus. As a matter of fact, I have that little avatar back there, and Krishna and Jesus are side by side. So these little breadcrumbs were dropped, showing me that I might have had issues with Jesus, but Jesus did not have a single issue with me, and was calling me home. And I like the thought. There's a reason why I call my channel the the Yoga of True Forgiveness, um, because I like to think, imaginary story, that after the battle, um, Krishna and Arjuna, where Krishna revealed the four paths of yoga, they were walking off the battlefield, and Krishna put his arm around Arjuna and whispered, "But there's a fifth path that the world's not quite ready for, and it's forgiveness." Um, and that brings us to A Course in Miracles, where I think collectively, we need this forgiveness.
I think collectively it's a really interesting time, because the more people go within, the more the apparent darkness has to come to be seen. And so the more that people are choosing peace within, the more, just like the wave, actually, the wave that I told you about when I had that moment where it was definitely Jesus commanding within, but we all have Jesus within us. It's not that I'm saying I am the new Jesus.
Right.
It's within us all, right? So we can all have that happen within us. But what's happening in the world is, because we're not focused on peace within, or peace in our own individual realities, it's projecting outwards. And so that projection is just going to keep going. The more that we're like, rah, rah, look at that wave that's really scaring me. The more that we make that projection out there real, the more it's going to get louder and louder and louder and more difficult. But really, when we can go within and we can start to choose the true forgiveness path within our realities, which is to eventually realize that no one did it to us, that there was a selection. And it's a difficult one, because when we're not ready to hear that, it becomes very much like, no, this happened to me, and I'm not saying that, it's not a very difficult journey. It can be a very difficult journey. But to come out of victim consciousness, we have to let go of being the victim. And so for victim consciousness to end, and for us to, to move to heaven on earth, which is already here, then we have to get to the place where it really is about peace. And the peace isn't something that happens by taking the leaders down. The peace is something that happens by not screaming at the wave that's out there how it needs to stop and it's dangerous and it's scary. It's really about for each of us to go within and go, hold on, who am I still believing has done something to me? Who am I still holding in a cage? Who am I still, bludgeoning with my mind? Who am I still killing? Who am I still fighting? And until we stop individually from doing those things within our own existence and projecting, because, I've worked with a lot of clients and the projections are something else. I worked with this really amazing woman just recently who said, she came to me because she said her son was in lots of trouble with the police. And we had this great conversation where I said, no, that's one version of him. And she said, and I can often hear, you can hear when the ego is there, like you can hear it, it's evident, and it's usually in one word. And she said, it's just disgusting that this is happening on my doorstep. He's bringing this to my doorstep. And I was like, no, 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 no. That's the ego. Like, there's the ego right there. This is your son. And there's another version of him. So let's start to believe in the new version of him. And it wasn't easy for her, because she had to let go of the one that was like, this is my doorstep. But that was within her, right? So when she started to let go of that and let go and let go, and she did, the most phenomenal thing happened. The police arrived at her house and said, out of nowhere, someone has owned up to everything we had your son on account for, and he's completely off the hook. Because she had started to believe in the new version of him and not the old version that she was selecting. And so when she dropped that totally, the 3D or this dream, whatever we want to call this, has to bring the new version. And so the way that that happened was the police just said, oh yeah, he's completely off the hook. So it's really like when we truly start to go to those places, like true forgiveness is to go, oh, that was one version that I selected. Let me select a completely new version. So it's kind of like changing a channel. And then our life experience will completely shift it. But until we individually do that, I think we're maybe going to continue to experience these very difficult external experiences.
And that's the miracle right there, asking for that shift in perception.
That's it.
And sometimes we can't do it. We need a little help.
Yeah.
And I always love the fact that we are not left to our own device.
No.
That we have the Holy Spirit, which is the voice for God within us. Because let me ask this question, because I think this will tie things up. And it was, do we really forgive, or do we just convince ourselves that we do? And if we still think back to the differences or incidents, is that forgiving truly?
Okay. So it's a really good question. When we come from the place of seeing, as the Course in Miracles says, if that's what we choose to do, if we come from the place from, oh, we came here in this way to this world in this way, like there is no earth in the way that we think, it's all a big illusion, right? That we created this to have the experience of separation, and that to be able to do that in duality, we had to have a story. So each of us had to go through trauma, suffering, because ultimately we know deep down that we're whole, perfect, and complete on a level that we can't feel or activate here in this moment. But we know, because the awareness of us, the awareness of me, is the same awareness of everyone on this call, and that's God, right? So the awareness within us is God. So wherever we're putting our awareness blossoms, right? Whether that is, whatever it is that we're doing. But our awareness has been really caught up in our story, thinking these people have done things like in a nightmare. So when we're in a nightmare and we think all these terrible things are happening, there's still one mind dreaming those terrible things that we think are happening. And so when it comes to it, if we're like thinking the story is real and then we start to forgive, then that's not true forgiveness, because we still believe that the story is real. So what we do then is somewhat like a hierarchical pardoning, where we say, you know what, you stole my shoes, but I'm going to forgive you. So that's a pardon. And that's from a hierarchical place. That's like, you've done something, but I'm going to let you off with it because I'm the good one here. That's not forgiveness. Forgiveness is, oh, there are infinite versions of you, and for whatever reason, I chose to experience this version of you where you took my shoes. But there's another version of you that didn't take my shoes. I just chose to experience this one, and it brought me this, this, and this, and this. Thank you. But there's another version of you. And that's true forgiveness, because you're not blaming them. You take full responsibility that you selected that version of reality to experience that. And now you're going to select another version of reality. So hopefully that answers your question. What was the second half of that question?
Before I ask that second half,
Yeah.
you really just described such a radical path of responsibility that we are not laying out, we're not doing away with the victimhood. I'm not a victim of the world that I see. And we are accepting responsibility for every single condition that comes into our life. And when we're able to do that, in that full acceptance, that's when we can forgive. That's when we can say, I made this. You didn't do this.
Yeah.
I made
We have
this.
to We have to really understand that, though, because otherwise we try to do that, but in fear, and then that can go wrong.
Right.
So we have to really understand. We have to really, like a way to do that is to start small. Start with really little things. There'll be someone on your street that you're like, oh, they're always really grumpy. So they will always be really grumpy, and you will always experience them as the grumpy one because you're selecting the version of them that they're always really grumpy. But if you just go into your mind and go, I'm going to stop believing that they're just really grumpy. I'm just going to stop that. I'm just going to, I love them. They're just amazing. I really love how they smile all the time. It's so beautiful. And you just start to see another version of them. That version will show up in your world. So you
That's
start,
it's like the great line in the course that says, "Do not seek to change the world; seek to change how you see the world."
that's it.
It all comes back to um,
That's it.
what who are we choosing to see the world? Are we seeing the world through the lens of the ego, which is always going to give us that grumpy neighbor,
Yeah.
or are we going to see the world through the lens of the Holy Spirit,
Yeah.
which is going to see that we chose that grumpy neighbor so
Yeah.
that we can forgive, so that we can love, so we can extend ourselves. And then it turns out that the neighbor isn't quite so
That's
grumpy after all.
it. That's it. But I think ultimately the course is leading us to see that it's a simulation, and each of us is in our own separate individual. There's a line at the I don't know if it's in any of the other courses, but editions. But in the original edition, and I really don't believe in this thing that one edition is better than the other. They're all fantastic and they all lead us to Holy Spirit. So it makes no difference which one it is. But in the original, it starts right at the beginning. There's one line that I only read after I lost everything and everything, shifted in my world. There's one line and it says right at the beginning, the only prayer you really need to realize is, here I am, Lord. And when I first began, I didn't read that. But when I started to notice how life was a little bit like a simulation, and it was kind of leading me in that place where I was like, but hold on, these miracles that happen, it can only explain it, that that it would be a simulation. Why would the seas part for me? And then eventually I read from lots of people who have said Jesus really came here to show us that it was a simulation, for us to really see that these miracles can be done. And then when I went back and read that line, it read very differently. It read, here I am, Lord.
Oh wow!
And so it says you would do really well to just pray this one and really understand this lesson. And it gives you it in the first paragraph on right in the beginning of the book. Here I am, Lord. And then at the end of the book, I'm not at the end of my journey at all, not nowhere near, but at this point in my journey, I'm like, oh, that's what you meant. Each of us is in our own reality simulation. We think of it, that's why it would make total sense that it says nothing real can be harmed, nothing unreal exists, meaning you're not harming anyone in your reality, not in truth, nothing, because it's really like a projected reality, you know? So yeah,
Right.
there you
Um, I want to address something that a friend said that takes a lot of strength to shift an attitude and perspective. I respect that, but um, we're not relying on strength, and we're not the ones who are doing the shifting. We're literally handing everything over. I can't make me, Eric. I can't make that shift. I don't have that strength. I have tried. I tried all kinds of stuff in my life, making these interchanges, and I failed miserably at every single one. I've gritted my teeth and I meditated and said, I will achieve peace of mind, which of course gives you the opposite of the objective. Um, but when I let go, when I turn everything over, when I say the prayer that you just offered, I am here, Lord. I'm making myself available. I'm saying, I can't do it. Help me.
absolutely.
Um,
We can't alone. We wouldn't even know how. But just like I said before, I don't know how to write a song. Not in truth. I know it's a structure. I know it's this. I know a great title, and I know, it needs to be about this kind of thing, or let's give it a message, or all of those things. But I don't know how to write a melody. Not in truth. How do I know how to do that? So none of us know how to do any of that stuff. What happens is we make space in the mind, and we hand it over. Just like there's a fantastic thing in the Course in Miracles, where it talks about the rules for decision. And rules for decision are just amazing, because you get up in the morning and you say, Holy Spirit, I'm not going to do this day without you. I'm not going to make any decisions without you. And we have to remember Holy Spirit, because we can get really scared of the language, or we can think this is religious language, and it really isn't. But your Holy Spirit is like, you are God on a high level, and you are also God in the awareness in your mind. And the body is also part of this, simulation, whatever
Right.
we're in, the dream. But we have Holy Spirit, which is the bridge between us and God, because God is unity. And so God can't be in duality. It just doesn't, there's no way. Yeah. Two can't be in one. One can't be in two. It doesn't work. So we have Holy Spirit, which is able to go between our God self and our here self, and can bring us to our God self. But in the Course in Miracles, it talks about the rules for decision. And so what we do is, in the morning, you can say, this is the kind of day I'd love to have. I'd love to feel peace. I'd love to feel joy. I often say I'd love to have a Holy Spirit surprise. And some of those surprises are just fantastic. Like the most amazing things turn up. So, and you run through your day of, I have to go, I don't know, maybe I'm teaching at university. I have to go to the university. And so I would really love my travel to just be super easy. And so what you do is you hand over your whole day and you give it. And then if you start to make decisions by yourself, which means you're not going with the flow of Holy Spirit's flow, because it will just flow for you. Everything will just turn up. But if you start to make decisions out of fear, you'll end up down a path that's a bit messy, and you won't end up with the day that you kind of wanted to have. And so at that point, you just go, whoa, hold on. Holy Spirit, I must have made a decision by myself. And you can usually, and this is what's happened in my life, I can usually trace it back and go, oh, yeah, there was a train on the platform. It was right there for me, but I didn't trust it. And so I was like, I think I'll just go and check it out first. And then that's where it all started to go wrong. But if you flow with what's just arising, life just becomes very miraculously beautiful. So when we're trying to do it by ourselves, what we're doing is all those thoughts that are arising, what about this? What about that? What about the other? That's all the ego going, you can't do this. Don't do this. Like stay
Right.
here with me. So yeah, there you go.
That reminds me of how David Hoffmeister described how he lives his life. Just a continuous moment of saying yes to the Holy Spirit.
That's it. Fantastic.
Um, and a
He's
great teacher, David Fishman, who was one of the first students who've been practicing for 50 years, uh, sort of gave me the mantra of lesson 25. I don't know what anything is for.
yeah.
Um, and I love returning back to that, because every time I think I know what something's for, I'm back to making a mess out of everything.
That's it. That's it. That all of them, because we're being pointed, especially because we'll often, everyone does this. We go, please, like, can you show me what to do? Or I don't know where to go, or, show me what you would have me do, or where would you have me go? But things arrive and then we don't trust it. We don't, like, there's a great book called The Surrender Experiment by, I can't remember his name now. Anyway, you'll find it.
Mark Singer, I think.
No, it's not him. It's the guy who wrote, Michael Singer.
Michael Singer, right?
Great book, absolutely brilliant book, and it turned up on my journey, and I was like, yeah, I'm going to do this one. And it was about surrender, and someone came into my house and said, would you come to Mexico for the winter? And I had £7.50 in my bank, which is like maybe $10. And I didn't have any credit cards, and there was no family I could ask, so I was like, but because I'd read the book and I was doing Course in Miracles, I was like, I'm going to say yes, but I really can't see how that's going to happen. And so this person said, come with me to Mexico in November, and we'll go for the winter, and we'll take the kids. So I was like, okay, great. Anyway, the time came, and I took my kid out of school. I still had £7.50. I didn't know how it was going to happen, but I was like, you know what? I have to try this. I have to surrender because this has arrived. And so it must need to happen. But maybe it's just my faith has to be in place. So I just had my faith, and I told the school, and I took my kid out, and I told everyone else, and I still didn't have the money, no credit cards, nothing was happening. It wasn't going to happen. But I still believed. And then the woman who was going to go to Mexico with her kids called me and said, I can't go. I don't have any money. And I was like, shit, I've already committed that I'm going to surrender to this. And now she's not going. And she was the driver. And I didn't drive. And my kid's 8 years old. But I still committed and I still surrendered. And the weekend before I was meant to go to Mexico, that I had decided my, preordained date, someone asked me, and I was still thinking I was going to go, but I had no idea how. I didn't even have the flight. And then someone called me and said, would you come and teach? Would you come and teach about the Course Miracles at this retreat? So I said, sure. And that was the first time anyone had ever done that. So it's not like something I could rely on.
Right.
But I said, sure, I'll come and teach. So I went and I taught on the Friday, and I stayed for the retreat. And on the Sunday, this woman said, thank you very much. And I went home, and that was it. And on the Monday, she put £10,000 into my account. And I was like, what's that for? And she just said, lots of people joined up to a 9-month program, and I added you as one of the teachers. So here's £10,000. And so not only did I book my flight, but I booked the flight for lots of other people and their kids too. And we all went to Mexico for 3 months. But it was a really phenomenal thing of like, when we pray and say, like, show me what you'd have me do and what you would have me, where you would have me go, our next step for us to expand and grow will show up. And it might not be comfortable, but it shows up for your next step. But we can often look at it, go, oh, but I have £7.50. I can't go to Mexico. It's not going to happen. Instead of, this has arrived, so it must be my next step. Let me take this next step and do it with everything that I've got.
I came to that realization the other day with my channel that I am now doing what first time in my life, be 61 next month. First time in my life, I feel on point that I'm performing my special function, what I'm supposed to be doing. But I arrived here by continuous moments of, this is the worst thing that ever happened to me. Thinking that I understood why this was happening, that I know what this is for. And of course, I didn't know what this is for. Had I realized that I don't know, but I trust. I don't know. I am here, Lord. I'll show up. I will just show up. How much easier it would have been. I would not have put myself through that. This is the worst thing that ever happened. Because everything that happened was a moment that I got to pivot in a different direction that brought so many people, has led me to having a beautiful conversation with you. And we just don't know. Trust, trust, trust.
Well,
Wake
no,
up,
my
wake
goodness,
up and say, I will make no decisions on my own today.
that's
Jesus,
it.
what should I do today? Where
That's
should
it.
I go? What should I say and to whom? I
That's
had
it.
no idea when I asked you to come up if you would say yes or who are you? Uh, um, and yet um, your overwhelming yes. I would love to. Seriously, I get to come up on a YouTube channel and talk to people about the thing that I love to talk about. I'm always
Right.
blown away when I get those responses from people.
Yeah, yeah. You're doing a great job. Well done. Love it.
Thank you, thank you. We're gonna wrap things up in a minute. I can't believe we've been talking almost an hour and a half.
Amazing.
But can we wrap things up with? So where are we right now, Kirsty? Um, you've taken us on a journey of your life
Hmm.
from pinnacle of your career to walking away to homelessness, um, to making it in a restaurant with a group of people, uh, all the way to this point. Uh, what is What's happening with you?
I think, well, what I've noticed, things have started to show up in my life that seem to point in the direction of me writing, I think, maybe the biggest piece of music I've ever written. I mean, like the most important music I've ever written. It's all been really important. It's all not been important at all. But something in me, cathartically, I think, and also for the wisdom that I've learned, something in me wants to write. And it would either be a book or it would be music. And so I think it has to be the music. And so I think maybe what will happen next, maybe, who knows, because, you know, things shift, but I seem to have been placed into a space that's very safe and beautiful and have a gorgeous home that happened miraculously. And in this home, I have a space for it. Someone actually paid to put a piano in my house. They just said, please, would you look after my piano and could we put it in your house and we'll pay for it? So they just like moved it in. So the piano
Right.
has a, my guitar is here and all these lyrics and melodies seem to be arriving. And I've got this really gorgeous kind of visual that I really want to tour the most visual, beautiful show that I could ever create. I want to go to town with creativity and make something absolutely stunning that's a bit of a magnus opus, but also with workshops so that I'd like to involve other teachers, not necessarily Course in Miracles, but other teachers to give workshops at these gigs around wherever I perform, because I'd really like people who feel like they're super, like really in victim, to see that there is another way, to see that there is another, there's a, I don't know, or people who are not, like, I don't know who will turn up. But I'd like to do workshops and then a big show. But the show feels like it's something really beautiful, like a big mix of fashion and and joy and maybe a big choir and something that just really blows my mind to create. So I think that's the path that I'm on. I'm not sure how that will unfold, but that's what I want to kind of non-apologetically say some shit that the world maybe would like to hear.
Right. Right.
You know those kind of gigs where people go, I hated it, and other people go, I loved it. I want to create something like that where some people walk out because I've obviously said, some stuff that maybe needs to be heard and other people haven't. I don't know. Something like that feels like it's on its way.
There's a large segment that just doesn't want to hear that, whatever it might be. They don't want to hear the one thing that they need to hear. And even when they say that was BS, there's been a shift because they heard it. So we might not want to hear it, but I think, think
But I'm
of,
sure it's about that they heard it. I think it's about, if we're going to come from the Course in Miracles perspective, right? It's about, I often don't say things because I'm scared to say them because people might be up in arms, or they won't like the simulation aspect, or they won't like this aspect, or what do you mean, the waves parted, what, BS, or, who does she think she is, talking about these weird things. Like, it's not about them because there is no other in that way. And because I'm not here to teach anyone, it's about, can I say the things that I've seen so that I'm honest, so that I'm true? And can I stand for truth? Can I stand for truth? Rather than, I don't want to convince anyone. I just don't want to be afraid. I just don't want to come from fear anymore. I want to be able to really fly the flag of the beauty that I've seen.
and I love the fact that the truth that you're standing up for isn't we're not standing on an aisle of individuality and holding our flag and staking our little egoic claim. This is my truth, which is a big saying. Is this is my
Yeah, yeah.
truth, right?
My truth.
We're talking about what's true. We're talking about reality. We're talking about the ultimate underlying principle of everything, which is love, which is God. That's the that's where we're
That's
planting our flag right there.
it. That's it. That's it.
Yeah.
But it feels like there's a lot of people who are hanging that flag. And so, yeah, it just feels like maybe musically it's my job to hang the flag musically. And I don't know what that will look like, and I don't know what it will sound like. And I don't even know, like the other day I took my voice out for a little bit and was like, oh, my voice doesn't even, I'm not sure how I sing now in the same way. And then I just had this feeling of like, you're not supposed to sing in the same way. Like you're just supposed to be you right now. Can you be like that beautiful phrase of like beautiful means be you in full. So I just want to go be me in full in, in whatever way, shape or form and fly the flag of everything that I've seen and the the hard bits and the difficult bits and all the bits in between. So yeah, I've decided I think it's a trilogy. And at my final point in homelessness so far, hopefully that is finished, um, I ended up staying with these really beautiful people who I totally judged. But it ended with them just being so gorgeous. And I had my 50th birthday with them and New Year's and a bit of Christmas with them. And they they were just the most beautiful people I'd ever met after I'd stopped judging the hell out of them. And it was just, yeah, a very beautiful moment. But one of the things that was so special about it was that one of the women who was in this place was going to go and have a bath in a another place. They were staying in a hostel, and I was in the hostel with them. And there was another place where they could go and have a bath. And one of the guys who was in the hostel said, "Oh my God, you can have a bath. I'm going to go to the next city and I'm going to get you a bath bomb." And so it was like this really beautiful moment of all these like dreams coming true for people in this beautiful hostel. And then she said, "Well, if I'm going to have a bath and a bomb and a bath bomb, then maybe I'd really like to have one of those cocktails. It's called a porn star." And suddenly in my head, I was like, I think that's the first album title for my trilogy. I think I'm going to call it Bath Bombs and Porn Stars. And then, the second one being whatever the second one, and the final one being the I Am. So, yeah, it just feels like there's this trilogy of, duality to oneness coming musically.
I love those titles.
Thank you.
Um, the first song that I heard you sing, and I sent this to some friends, "If I Can't Make You Happy,"
Yeah.
um, and a live performance.
Yeah, it's good.
Um, and I literally remember thinking, what is this? It contains so many. I absolutely love jazz, um, and it had elements of jazz. It had a lot of swing, even had a little bit of punk
Yeah.
uh, thrown some rockabilly thrown in there. So I'm looking forward to seeing um, that voice coming out of you and presenting it and
Yeah.
everything that needs to be said at this moment.
Yeah.
Um, and I hope in some small way, maybe you'll come back and maybe um,
Of course.
offer your voice here again to
Yeah.
us.
Yes, that would be amazing. I think once Bath Bombs and Porn Stars has been created, I'll come back and we can chat about how well it's done.
Awesome. Um, and thank you for the. I came late to that line. Um, I am here, Lord, because I got my original version.
One second, it's here, I
Yeah,
am Lord.
here I am, Lord. Thank you.
Or it's here,
Um,
but yeah.
that actually came to me this year
Mm,
because I got my original version, the Foundation for Inner Peace, 1990, I think maybe 1993, and it's the only version that I've had, and it doesn't have that line in there. And I wanted to write about the shortest prayer that I could find in A Course in Miracles, to have a, the Monopoly cards, to get out of jail free card. I wanted
Yeah.
that short prayer that I could offer to people. Reach for this.
Yeah.
When you can't think of anything else, reach for this.
Yeah.
And that prayer came up in my search. And it wasn't even in my version, and it wasn't even in my online version of the Foundation for Inner Peace.
I think that's, sorry to close on this, especially for people listening as well. Like, I really think that the course is so metaphysical that certain lines pop up to certain people at different times at the right time. Because there was one line that I read in the course. I was loving the course. I was loving doing the course. And one day I read this line and it said, "Put the book down and walk away." And I was absolutely devastated, because I was like, what do you mean? I now have to let go of the Course in Miracles. And I had to let go. And not many people have seen that line. I'm not saying go search for it. I really wouldn't do that.
Right.
But I was just like, how interesting that the course, because the course is guiding us. That's why there's no difference between any of the courses. That's why, we see in so many of our circles in the Course Miracles groups, people fighting over the additions and, fighting each other over specific words. And, instead of, and that's okay. It's all part of it, right? But I think when it comes to how each of us is led, we're led to different lines at different times in different ways. And sometimes we're led away from it, and sometimes we're led back to it, and sometimes we're led to something else. Like, I was really led to the Neville Goddard
Okay.
work after A Course in Miracles, and then both of them fused together, and then it all made sense. It all started to really beautifully make sense. So
I had a teacher tell me that he knew the course was true because of that line, put the book down. And because he said the ego would never tell you to put the book down.
yeah,
If the course was written from an egoic position, it would say, you need this book and you need to stay with it forever and never let it go and go out and convince other people. Hit them on the head with it. You got to pound it into them.
that's it.
But
That's it.
when he read, put the book down, come to the course empty handed. When he read that, he's like, I know this came from Christ, that
Yeah.
this is a book of love, because the ego would never tell you.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's a great point. The ego would tell you, do this for for 30 years and convince everyone else about it. Something like that.
Convince everyone. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not saying that if someone's done it for 30 years, that's not what I mean, but yeah, that's it. But yeah, I just remember being devastated. Like, no, but I really like the
Right.
book now. And
Right.
then, like,
I'm just getting to understand it.
yeah, that's it. I'm just starting to get this. And now you're telling me to put it down. But yeah, but I really did. I put it down, and then other things started to turn up, like Ramana Maharshi. Lots of other things took me on the journey, and then here we are, where we
I
are now.
knew, I knew Maharashi. Do you know how I knew for you?
How?
Because you said there are no others. Um, and it's the beautiful line when he was asked by a follower, how do we treat others?
There are no
And
other.
he replied with a smile, there are no others.
Yeah, but
That could have been right out of.
we really get that. Like, on the journey, we really get that, because when you start to undo projection, you really see how the other person shifts, and then it's like, hold on, you're not outside of me. You can't be. And so but also in each of our realities, there actually aren't any others. There are just dream figures, and
Right.
you dreamer of this particular dream. So there can't be others. But also, how could there be others? There's only one of us here. There's one awareness amongst us, one Son of God amongst us, and one ego amongst us.
Right.
So
Isn't it amazing to come across a line from a great teacher that could have been right out of the Course in Miracles? Ramana Maharshi could have said that. When he said that, it could have been right out. Jesus could have said that in the Course.
I think he
Um,
does say it in the course. I think it is mentioned in the course. Here and there, there's lots of, you think there are others, but you're
right, right,
dreaming. There's one mind dreaming. So I think, but also ultimately that all of them, Muji, Rupert Spira, non-duality, Course in Miracles, Ramana Maharshi, Neville Goddard, everything is pointing to exactly simulation theory. Everything is pointing to exactly the same thing. The Bible, Christianity, Judaism, all of it is pointing to the same thing. Like the scriptures of it, not religion, right? Religion is definitely something we can't talk about within this context, but all of the scriptures are leading to the same thing, which is you are not separate, you are dreaming, it's an illusion, and you have ultimate control, but you are insisting that you're a victim, and you're not. So
It doesn't get any clearer than the kingdom of heaven is within, does it?
no, it doesn't.
It's, I mean, there everything's summed up. If we never got any further in the Bible than the
Yeah,
kingdom of heaven is within,
and
we
that's
would get
it.
everything. We would get it all.
Well, the kingdom of heaven is the imagination. Einstein said it. The imagination is, because all of this is imagination echo. This is what we've imagined so far. So when we go to the imagination and we deeply imagine something, like to really finish, I just played this game once with someone and I said, come on, let's just play a game of which mastery would you love to entertain for a day? Like if you could step into anyone's job for a day and be them to experience what they know in their mastery, what would you choose? And we were both thinking about it. And I closed my eyes and I went into the imagination and I just imagined what it would be like to be a gymnast, like an award-winning Olympian type gymnast. Because I was like, in this lifetime, I don't think I'm going to be one of those, award-winning gymnasts who do
Right.
the 200. And well, who knows? But I don't think so. But I really imagined, and I was like, oh, yeah, that would be amazing. And I just forgot about it. And 2 days later, I was in a tiny, tiny little bar. I was in this tiny bar. There was only 2 people behind me, one person at the bar and a band of 3 people. And I was listening to the band. And this guy at the bar, I got talking to, and we're just chatting away. And I said, what do you do? And he said, promise me you won't laugh. And I said, I won't laugh. Tell me what you do. And he said, I'm the British champion gymnast. And I was like, what? Because it was only 2 days before that I had just imagined what would be the most amazing mastery I'd like to step into. And I was like, champion gymnast. But it was in the imagination. And that's when I clicked on how, hold on, the imagination is the kingdom.
Right.
So if we go to the imagination, just like no one has ever imagined an album or how to build a new TV or the next car, everything has come from the imagination, which is the kingdom, and then it's projected out into this world. And so for each of us, what we're imagining, unfortunately, whether it's good or bad, in either way, that's why Jesus says in the Course, you would do really well to guard your thoughts, to be
Mm.
careful of what you're thinking, because we don't realize that's what's giving us our experience all the time. So, but yeah,
And
fantastic. Go on.
that would be very Neville Goddard as well. Be careful with those thoughts because we are literally uh, creating the reality that we're experiencing.
That's it. That's it.
And
They're all
next time you
collective.
come back, let's talk some Neville Goddard.
Oh yeah, definitely. I'd love to. It's yeah, some phenomenal things have happened with that. But yeah, all amazing things, gorgeous, gorgeous conversations. Thank you. And thank you everyone who's on here. It's been really beautiful to have this chat.
Thank you so much. And I will share this. I'll send you the link um, to the live stream
Nice.
after it's all taken care of. And
Amazing.
I've been doing clips, shorts and long form. I'll send you those if you ever want to share them
Gorgeous.
because you have really shared a beautiful message with us,
Thank you.
and people need to not just hear it; they need to experience it. So, thank you.
You're welcome. And thank you to everyone on the call. Bye bye.
Take care.
Farewell.
Bye,
Bye.
guys.